Ladies and gentlemen, today I hope you'll bear with me and choose to sit down with me for a moment as we have a bit of a chinwag about Planetside 2. It's a game that I've loved for the last, what is essentially 10 years now, but just because it's something that I love doesn't mean that it's perfect. And man, Planetside has one big problem that will sometimes test my patience with this game, and in all honesty, this is a problem that could be very well driving a lot of new players away from the game, and it ain't easy to fix either. G'day there once again viewers, your mate Kamikaze78 here, and today we're going to be diving into what my biggest gripe with Planetside 2 is currently. As someone who has been playing Planetside 2 since the launch of this game, I've seen it go through a whole ton of change. The game looks and plays very different by comparison to where it was at launch on many levels. Hossen didn't exist at all, SMGs weren't a thing. I mean shit, nanites were broken up into 3 subcategories of resource that allowed you to pull force multipliers and infantry equipment. The point is, things have changed at many levels, and I like to think that with the game, I myself as a player have also gone through a whole lot of change as well. My perspective on things surrounding this game has changed, probably more aggressively over the last year or so above anything else, but over the years it's clear that things that bothered me today didn't bother me a few years ago because, well, I was a different kind of player back then. But today I'm very much a player that cherishes the first-person shooter part of Planetside MMOFPS categorization. To me, the MMO side of the game is responsible for setting the scene of the awesome battles that, can take place here. It's responsible for the back-of-the-box experience that outlines and sets the scene for what the game is capable of when it performs well. But the core FPS mechanics that are in play here in the moment-to-moment gameplay and the skill curve that exists in the FPS component of the game are what keeps me coming back when it is all doing everything as it's supposed to be. Sure, I'm one for enjoying the odd footsurg across an open field every once in a while, or looking up to see a massive air battle taking place above me, or being part of that glorious moment when 2 massive armor columns clash into a symphony of explosions. And the MMO side of the game allows that to happen, so I'm thankful for it. But I really cherish the FPS component of the game above all else, and that should really come to a surprise to no one. It's the cornerstone that makes up the majority of the content I release on this channel. I really cherish when that FPS component is allowed to be present and at the forefront. Which leads me to my point here today, ladies and gentlemen. My one complaint about Planetside 2 in 2022. And that complaint is that right now, the most efficient way to win in this game, at least in the context of the objective of the game, is not by being the best in a fight, or by slogging your way through a fight and overcoming your opponent. Sure, that's a way to win, but we gamers are all about efficiency over anything. We will do whatever it takes to win, we're a competitive bunch. So it's no surprise to me that right now, many players are opting for the most efficient way to win the fight, which is by doing everything you can to ensure that the fight does not happen. And that right there is the basis of today's video. The fact that right now, Planetside 2 encourages players above all else to make sure that the fight does not happen to win the objective. If you follow me over on Twitter, you might have seen this come from me a few weeks ago. It made the Planetside subreddit, so you may have seen it there as well, but the sentiment very much remains true to this day. There has been a lot of situations lately where I've been having a pretty fun fight and there's been some legitimate back and forth taking place between factions and capture points are flipping accordingly, only for the said fight to be absolutely obliterated out of nowhere. Whether that be, due to a massive overpopulation from one faction just steamrolling the fight with little to no resistance, or whether that be a spam of force multipliers finding their way to spawn locking a faction into a spawn room, or just killing the fight entirely by sniping the Sundra, or a huge platoon starting the capture on a base that has no resistance or no defense present, with the goal of locking down all spawn options before that fight even begins in the first place. There are plenty more scenarios that exist, and we can sit here pulling them out of a hat for hours, but I think you get the point. And I know that I talk a lot about overpopulation in those above examples, and I know what many are going to say here as a rebuttal. Cammy, if you would lead platoons more often, you would be able to counter some of this stuff more often by having more numbers under your wing. Which, yes, is true to a certain extent. Leading platoons all day would mean that I would be better equipped to handle a crapload of dudes landing on my head all at once. But it doesn't necessarily solve solve the overarching problem here, because the root of the problem here is not that players are dumping bases with massive population willy-nilly to take a base. That's the byproduct of players seeking that all-important victory condition. The root of the problem is with a bunch of small, sometimes independent factors that each point you towards avoiding a fight altogether to most efficiently satisfy that win condition of capturing a continent. And that is something that has been amplified over and over again to me as of late, and maybe something that I've just been noticing a bit more lately due to my growing perspective or changing priorities, but damn, I am noticing it way more often. And I truly think that there are many other players out there like me who share my love for the FPS genre who would probably love this game if the fights were not only allowed to exist in the first place, but also kind of be the forefront of the experience. But to make this kind of video without actually shedding some light on what factors I think are contributing to this issue would be counterproductive. So I want to spend some time focusing on that for a bit now, and I hope you guys are here for the ride. First things first, it's actually one of the things that's the very foundation of Planetside 2 and everything that it is today. That being the sandbox nature of the game. Now look, I'm not sitting here and saying that Planetside should immediately strip away the freedom that it offers players in the open sandbox, because that is a part of what the franchise is as a whole. To be completely rid of the sandbox nature would be to completely design a whole new game. And I've gone on the record in the past to defend the sandbox nature of this game plenty of times, and I still do, because said sandbox experience is what we have to thank for some of those sweet Planetside 2 moments that we all have from time to time. And player-based freedom is what gives such a wide variety of players and approaches validity in the game. Are some playstyles over-rewarded for the effort required? Possibly, but that's a balanced conversation I think, and outside the remit of this video. The sandbox nature of this game is what breeds some amazing player-driven moments, no doubt. But what the sandbox also does is place a severe amount of onus on the community to self-moderate itself to achieve the best possible form of gameplay that the game can offer. With most, if not all, FPS games on the market, the game sets the scene for how the round, match, whatever will play, and it's up to the players on how to approach the parameters set by the game. Some games like Squad, for example, take a more relaxed approach to this as well, requiring players to set up their own logistics and maintaining spawns and setting up defenses as the match plays out. However, in Squad, there's fixed match and team sizes. So while good logistics is important to have, it's never possible for one team to have more hands, eyes, ears, and simply weapons than another team at any given point in time. Planetside, however, takes it one step further and also lets players even handle the quantities of a fight within the sandbox nature of the game and how evenly a fight is split between the sides. It places yet another responsibility on the community who play the game to try and maintain an even balance of population between the sides to cultivate a fun first-person shooter experience. But then again, why would you do that if the game's objective is most effectively accomplished by dumping a significant amount of population on a base, so much so to the point where the enemy can't even fight because they simply don't have the same amount of guns as you do? Obviously, some communities opt to not do this in pursuit of a more skill-based approach with smaller, more tight-knit squads of highly skilled players, which is definitely a different mentality on display here, but the point stands that the sandbox nature of this game requires the community to moderate itself to keep fights engaging and fair at the raw population level. And when winning the objective is best achieved by throwing that out the window, of course we run into the problem that we have today. It begs the question, is infinite freedom in games like this always the best route to take to achieve the best gameplay experience? Sometimes I'd argue that's not the case at all, but that might also make for a great video in itself. Another big, massive problem that this game has always had since its inception, in my opinion, is the base design and the objective design. Now, obviously, Planetside has always advertised itself as being this massive combined arms shooter, right? Its scale and the raw amount of players it can put on screen in front of you at once is what it tries to sell itself on every time. And that would be a great thing if that's what the exact experience looked like. If you look at the Planetside 2 Return to Glory trailer that was released in July 2020, just post the Colossus update, there's a grand total of 2 shots in that trailer that are of what fighting around an actual objective in the game looks like, that being a capture point room. Because, let's be honest with ourselves, we are all familiar with base design in this game. Capture points, the very objectives that drive the win and loss condition for the majority of your experience here, are pretty much always in these small rooms and tight-knit spaces that are quite simply designed for smaller population levels to house a coherent combat experience. I will argue and go on the record here to say, and this is going to be a pretty harsh criticism of the game, but as soon as the majority of the bases in this game break the 3 to 4 squads per side threshold fighting at the base itself will often become a standoff mess over a doorway, hallway, or a small room where revive grenades are dictating the entirety of the outcome of that fight, not the actual moment-to-moment FPS gameplay beyond, as I said, just throwing in revive grenades. And hey, what's the best way to overcome that standoff? It's simple. Throw an insane number of force multipliers or population at it to steamroll the fight completely and just boot your enemy off that capture point with brute force. There is very rarely any meaningful back and forth over objectives that matter in this game when the game is trying to achieve its primary advertising point of being a massive scale shooter. And that to me is a problem in of itself. Obviously, if you start scaling bases up to accommodate for these larger forces, then smaller communities begin to suffer in ways in which they can't have an impact on the battlefield. This ties us back to the whole sandbox dilemma and the problems that arise from trying to create a cohesive experience for every single possible scenario your players can come up with. It's why all the other FPS games in the world in existence will design maps for a certain amount of players, because as soon as you add or remove player count for that experience, your map needs to change to accommodate the pace of gameplay in an enjoyable way. So it's a problem you well and truly can't fix easily without a total redesign from the ground up. It's something that I don't even blame this particular development team for. The design philosophy behind objective design and the base design that houses these objectives in this game has been a problem since launch. And it's really something that I don't see getting fixed anytime soon because you would need to change entire continents to make that happen. OSHA might have served as an opportunity to experiment and try to toy with new styles of objectives that better scale with more or less players, but that's still a sliding scale that is incredibly difficult to beat design-wise. Which I think is a bit of a detriment to this game, because when the majority of your objectives, and therefore the bases that are designed around your objectives, don't effectively house the scale that you're trying to, advertise for, you get messy gameplay that simply can't house a meaningful, cohesive FPS experience. The base design and objective design in this game also loops us into another big reason I think fights in this game are so unstable, and more importantly, why spawns can be so volatile and easily targeted. That being vehicles and the physical objectives that they have in the game, or the lack thereof. As it stands, vehicles in 99% of the gameplay in Planetside 2 have two tangible objectives, that being hunting spawns down for both attackers and defenders, and completely demolishing infantry up on a hill somewhere or in the skies at the flight ceiling, or whatever the case may be. It is just the short and blunt truth as to what this game is for the vehicle experience. It's something that I've discussed in a video at the start of the year at length, and I still stand by a lot of the commentary that directed that video. Combined arms in this game does not have to dial down to mindlessly left-clicking a spawn room shield and getting the one-off neuron activation you get whenever you get a kill notification, but it ultimately does dial down to that just due to how the only opportunity there is for vehicles to have an impact comes from finding that sweet infantry farming angle and just blasting away. And as I posited in that video a while back, I would still place a bet that a new player getting spawn locked into a base thanks to vehicle spam is probably more likely to bounce out of the game and not come back by comparison to a new player who made it to a capture point but ran into a more skilled infantry player. At least in the example where the encounter was beyond the spawn room, there was an opportunity to engage in the FPS side of the game. In the other example, there is not at all. You're just sitting there looking at a coloured window that represents your faction. And I'm not saying that to suggest that vehicles should not be a part of the FPS experience in its entirety, and that they should be ignored. Not at all. I love tanking in games, and in Planetside, I would still be the first person to get my Vanguard out for an all-out armor fight, or jump into a scythe for an aerial anomaly alert, rest in peace aerial anomalies. But by the same token, when a vehicle's primary role is to deny the FPS part of the game the ability to exist at all, I think you've got a real problem there. And I genuinely believe that if the game were to have more vehicle objectives integrated into the game, there would be more self-moderation from the community that the sandbox environment demands, in the sense that more players will be competing for vehicle objectives, and as such, it would limit the window of opportunity for hash farmers to have completely free reign. This once again stems off of the base design and objective design in the game, and is almost a byproduct of that issue in of itself, but all routes lead back collectively to robbing the game of the FPS experience from time to time. And of course, there's always the big old chestnut of the spawn system, and how, for example, the instant action system will almost always certainly throw you into an overpopulated fight if there's not a 50-50 fight present. There's a lot of freedom in the spawn system that allows players to completely steamroll good FPS experiences in this game at the click of a button, which again generates problems on its own. And I want to bring this up as a closing remark here, guys, because I know this is going to come up in the comment section down below, and I know that I'm going to hurt some feelings and kind of, take a chip of the egos of some of the really sensitive people in this community. And trust me, there are a few that I've had some run-ins with. And if I do see complaints like this, well, I'll know they haven't watched the whole video and that the opinion is somewhat invalid. But the point I'm making here is that I'm not making this video to belittle your Zerg fits of the community or people who like to sit in vehicles of the community. Have there been situations lately where I have been so pissed off at Zerg fit X, Y, and Z and vehicle player A, B, and C for killing a fight that I've been thoroughly enjoying and for denying me what I feel like is a fun FPS experience? Yes. I most certainly have. And this video was very close to being a big old rant at those kinds of players. But I really wanted to take a step back and sort of mature my thoughts on this topic a bit more, because at the end of the day, my goal is to not belittle people here. My goal is to try and improve a game that I absolutely adore. I am passionate about Planetside 2, I am passionate to see it succeed, and I know it has every capability to do so. But I also note that there are significant issues with the game and how it performs right now when it comes to providing a cohesive first-person shooter experience. And if someone doesn't bring these issues to the spotlight, there's a problem there as well. And by taking a step back and trying to work out why people play the way they do, and why we see the experience so dull at times in this game, I've been able to separate myself from taking a personal vendetta against some of these players, and instead working out why that is the case and how the game encourages it and where the weaknesses are. Because maybe that feedback will make its way to the developers one day, and maybe we'll see some actionable change that may result in a better outcome for this game. The challenges that Planetside 2 faces in harboring a fun and engaging first-person shooter experience is the exact reason why I truly believe not many first-person shooter players, which this game is clearly trying to attract because it is at its core a first-person shooter, don't make it through the first hour or two. Because, well, it's a game that struggles to very much captivate fun and engaging first-person shooter environments. So if you are someone who does operate in a vehicle, or who does operate in a Zerg ball that completely overpops fights in most situations, not saying I'm happy with you, and I'm not saying that I won't throw some, harsh words your guys' way during my streams, but I will say that I've been able to rationalize the perspective to a certain extent. I still don't think it's the right way to maintaining a healthy gameplay environment, but I can rationalize how the game is encouraging you to do this, and I think that's where the changes need to be made at that level. But anyway, I would love to hear in the comments section down below, guys, whether or not you agree with me on this take. Do you think Planetside 2 does harbour good FPS experiences, or do you think there's some work to be done here? Let me know down below. You can also leave a like or a dislike down below to let me know what you thought of the video too, if you'd rather do it in a more concise manner. As always, that helps a bunch with the YouTube channel as well, and get subscribed if you want to see more from me. Once again, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Peace out, and I will see you guys all in the next one. Take care, guys. Have a good one.